Ethan, my older brother, was a human-form hurricane. When I came, he treated me like an unwelcome guest. He was 6 at birth. It was more than simply normal sibling rivalry. His ADHD drove an insatiable demand for attention, and any affection my parents afforded me set off explosive reactions. Birthdays turned out to be the toughest. With screaming tantrums, he would seize them and transform what ought to have been my beautiful day into a wild performance. I recall being small, embarrassed, and completely overshadowed. His hostility got stronger as we aged. These were serious acts of meanness, not light-hearted nips. He would shove me and bite me. He seemed to object to my mere existence. Ethan had no friends, hence my parents, in their great wisdom, would insist on including him with mine. As I continually apologized for his tantrums and worked to prevent meltdowns, playdates became agonizing diplomatic exercises. Confusion I couldn't express. I felt a boiling contempt for him. Why could he not be normal? Why did I always have to tread carefully around his mood? Not a tormentor who made me feel like an unwanted weight. I yearned for a protective older brother. Part 2. The debacle at Disneyland. The worst bit was my parents' ignorance. They loved Ethan and explained every transgression as a quirky feature of his ADHD. They would dismiss my attempts to communicate my hurt, advising me to be more patient and sympathetic. Accommodating him always fell on me, even if it meant compromising my own happiness. I recall turning 13 and yearning for a vacation to Disneyland with just my folks. I begged them, seeing a wonderful respite from Ethan's continual turmoil. At last they agreed and set him to live with our grandparents. But all hell exploded when he learned. He screamed threats, stormed, and made it quite evident that my trying to have something for myself was a terrible betrayal. Startled by his ferocity, I gave in. Desperate to placate him, my parents pleaded with me to let him visit. The vacation turned out predictably as a fiasco. Ethan clung to our mother, rejected rides, and protested non-stop. His meltdowns took front stage, surpassing any happiness I might have experienced. His asking to return to the hotel within hours was our lovely day disintegrating into another Ethan-centric drama. Mom brought him back while Dad worked to save what remained of my birthday. My parents finally started to separate. Though my dad tried, the whole event seemed contaminated, a sour reminder that Ethan's needs always came first. Third, escape route. By 17, I was done. Done with the bullying, done with invisibility, done with my parents enabling. I yearned for a life outside of Ethan's shadow, in which my needs and emotions counted. Beginning my application to universities, I concentrated on those far, far away from my house. The parents were enraged. They wouldn't grasp my yearning to get away. They argued I owed it to Ethan to stay and be there. Then they unveiled their great scheme. They wanted to see the globe after retiring, allowing me to look after Ethan full-time. Years of sacrificing, apparently. Now it was my turn. I found myself astounded. Not only had they never discussed this with me, but they had basically brought me into the world to be Ethan's future caregiver. Like a kick to the gut, the awareness came to me. My life had been presented as a fix for their dilemma, not as a person with personal aspirations. Ethan needed constant monitoring, according to my mother, and only family could give that degree of care. For opposing, my dad labeled me conceited. Their comments stung, validating the ingrained sense of me as an afterthought, a tool in their Ethan-centric world. Fourth part, the cost of freedom. Knowing arguments were useless, I said little. Inside, though, I was more resolved than ever to get away. Ignoring their guilt trips and emotional coercion, I concentrated especially on my college applications. Though it wasn't easy, I at last was admitted to a university distant from my house. Of course, my folks went explosive. They threatened to break off all relations and financially cut me off. Driven, I looked to my grandparents. My rock, grandmother, rushed in to provide me cover and encouragement. The next 4 years passed quickly. College was demanding, emotionally, financially, and academically. While my friends had disposable income and parental support, I labored constantly to make ends meet. Driven by a fierce need to create a life for myself, I juggled a part-time job with a heavy course load. My parents stayed quiet in the meantime. Not one phone call or one word of concern. Their absence caused a continual pain, a reminder of their rejection. I wouldn't give up, though. I convinced myself I would be all right, as long as I kept ahead. Part 5. A New Beginning. Following college, I obtained an incredible job. It was the result of years of diligence and effort, a real gift for my fortitude. More significant than anything else, I began paying back my grandfather for the financial support he had given me when my parents wouldn't. I stayed close to my grandparents to ensure they understood the value of their love and faith in me. These were the family I selected, the ones who noticed me, valued me, and encouraged my aspirations. Years went by. I created a life for myself based on my own decisions and successes. The agony of my parents' desertion eased, then replaced a quiet will to disprove them. Section 6. The Reckoning. Then the word of Ethan began to trickle in. His behavior seems to have gotten worse. He had been threatening, pouring water on, and bullying local children. When the cops were summoned, he was detained for harassment. Not surprising, was it? For years, I had seen his unbridled conduct. I knew my parents put his comfort above that of others. Still, the news was a sobering reminder of how severely disturbed he was. My parents then called after 6 years of quiet. They were in great need. Ethan had a court date, and at last they were understanding the scope of his difficulties. With some hesitation, my dad acknowledged that Ethan bullied people. He apologizes for discounting my worries and for asking me to bear the weight of his actions. They aimed at reconciliation and at atonement. I listened, a weird mix of feelings whirling inside me. Part of me wanted to yell, releasing years of pent-up wrath and rage, but another, a tired part, simply lost interest now. Too much time had elapsed. I had created a life free of them, and I wasn't sure I could fit them in it anymore. Section 7. A weak bridge. My misgivings regarding their intentions were soon verified. Ethan's legal bills and therapy required financial assistance. They had been wallowing in debt after using their funds for his medical bills. I objected. How could I possibly pay the person who turned my childhood into a living nightmare my hard-earned money? I reminded them of their inertia and their continuous encouragement of his actions. I reminded them very softly that they had neglected to show me any compassion or defend me. They once more apologized, expressing regret for their earlier decisions. They wanted to be in my life, to help me in whatever capacity possible. Not sure I was ready to let go of the hurt and forgive. I agreed, nonetheless, to keep talking in search of a fresh sort of partnership built on integrity and respect. Ethan was told, in the meantime, to show up for court-ordered treatment. Though I wasn't holding my breath, that was a little step in the right direction. Deep scars have resulted from years of unbridled hostility and continual enabling. I didn't know whether I could forgive him or whether he could change. Still delicate is my relationship with my parents. We talk, but largely we discuss surface issues. The suffering of the past persists, a continual reminder of their wrong priorities and my lost childhood. I'm not sure whether I will ever really get along with either Ethan or them. I am learning, nevertheless, to negotiate the complex web of family with cautious hope and a sensible dose of self-preservation. Their apathy was a regular friend, stinging. It was more than just Ethan's bullying. It was the way my parents looked the other way, their relentless attention on him. Every birthday, every holiday, every milestone, it was always about adjusting to Ethan, controlling his tantrums, and ensuring he felt involved. My personal wants and needs seemed to disappear from view. I yearned for a relationship with my parents, and a sense of belonging free from reliance on Ethan's mood. But their focus always veers. Their affection felt conditional. I was the invisible wall separating their world from Ethan's storms, the peacekeeper, the mediator, the Disneyland vacation, the one I had been waiting for, the one meant solely for my parents and me. It turned out yet another victim of Ethan's rule. He screamed and threatened. He made it impossible for them to leave him behind, and they surrendered in their haste to stifle a catastrophe. They persuaded me to let him come, to give up my goal for his brittle tranquility. And so we traveled, a family broken by unsaid bitterness and unfulfilled wants. Ethan was miserable, as was expected. He detested the loudness, the throngs, the too strong stimulation. His outbursts started to play the music for our trip, drowning out the magic I had yearned for. Frustrated and tired, my parents ended up splitting and conquering. Mom brought Ethan back to the motel, while Dad tried to save what remained of my birthday. Still, the harm was done. The memory of that trip started to represent my invisibility, rather than a celebrated milestone. It served as a sobering reminder that, in the big picture of Ethan's requirements, My happiness came second. Long after the trip was ended, the invisible wounds of that day and many others like it would linger. By the time I turned 17, I was tired of being the family shock absorber, tired of my own needs being eaten by the relentless demands of Ethan's illness. I had a quiet revolt underway. I wanted a life beyond our house, where I could at last breathe. My escape path turned out to be colleges. I leafed over pamphlets, my eyes pulled to colleges far, far away from the stifling circle of my family. When my parents learned about my intentions, they responded quickly and angrily. Their inability to understand my want to go, my need to reject the role they had assigned me. "But Ethan needs you," they begged, their voices rich with a mix of confusion and mistrust. "You have a responsibility. You are his sister." Ownership. That phrase hung weighty in the air, the weight I had borne since the day I was born. I had to be patient. I had to comprehend. I had to sacrifice. But concerning my obligations to myself, they revealed their long-held idea during one of those furious debates. Retired, they planned to travel to at last experience the freedom they had been deprived of for so long. And who would be left behind looking after Ethan? Of course, me. After all, it was the reason they'd first hired me. The words lit a reality I had always felt, but never ventured to express like a lightning bolt. I was a long-term care plan for their troublesome son, a problem solver, not simply their daughter. Against their Ethan-centric universe, my own hopes and aspirations were meaningless. Ever the pragmatic, my mother said Ethan needed daily supervision, a degree of care only family could offer. Calling me selfish for even thinking about leaving, my father's voice was charged with accusation. Their comments were knives, cutting the brittle hope I had fostered for so long. But that day, something changed in me. Years of buried rage and unfulfilled desires drove a silent rebellion blossoming in my breast. I wouldn't be their answer. I would carve my own road even if it meant leaving all I had ever known. I would not give my future for a brother who had never noticed me or valued me. Their comments piercing, like flint on my spirit, but they simply strengthened my will. Knowing that discussions were like stones thrown at the mountain, they created noise but changed nothing. I spoke very little. Though the road forward was covered in doubt, my path was obvious. Clinging to the admission letter, a flimsy barrier against the tempest building around me, my parents screamed and threatened to cut off relationships and to stop all support. It seemed like their love paid for my obedience and sacrifice. I wailed in silence in my chamber, for the loss of what could have been, not for the loss of their love. I had never really felt it. A household I visited where my dreams were fostered and my needs took the stage. Sensing my hopelessness, my grandparents started to be my haven. As I cried, my grandmother stayed near with her soft wisdom and unflinching love. With his quiet rage in his eyes, my grandfather provided me a safe refuge where I could gather and strategize my getaway. Leaving was challenging. It was a tugging, a ripping apart from the one existence I had ever known. But it was also a release, a stride towards a future I could at last name. College turned into a whirl. I negotiated a new environment, one of demanding teachers, strange people, and ongoing financial difficulty. While some students savored the unbridled abandon of youth, I worked non-stop juggling a part-time job with a full academic load. Every late night, every frugal dinner, every tired moment proved my will. My folks said nothing, nor letters, nor phone calls, not even acknowledgement of my presence. Their absence was a clear-cut wound, a continual reminder of their rejection. But I threw all I had into my education, into creating a life apart from their approbation, refusing to let it define me. The years continued, a weary stroll toward an unclear horizon, but I got more robust and powerful with every stride. The agony of the past started to diminish, then a quiet confidence, and a strong will to build a future deserving of the sacrifices I had made took front stage. Graduation comes as the first thaw following a protracted winter, a promise of rebirth and coziness. Having my diploma, a mark of hard-earned success, I became immensely appreciative of the long trip that had brought me to this point. The planet opened her arms, presenting chances I had only dared to dream about. I landed a job, a decent one that pushed me and gave me direction. It tested me. The first pay felt to be a treasure, a physical gift after years of effort and sacrifice. Now more steady, I started to thread my past back together. I paid off my student loans, one step toward actual independence. And then, Thanksgiving filling my heart, I started paying back my grandfather, Though his kindness was a gift of genuine love, he had never anticipated it. It seemed significant to respect his faith in me, to show him that his investment in my future had paid off. My grandparents turned into my chosen family and anchor. I visited them frequently, sharing tales of my new life, my achievements and challenges. Their house was a haven, where I could at last let the past weigh nothing and just be. I had learned to live with their absence, to fill the void with the love of those who really saw me. The anger I had carried for so long started to fade, replaced by a quiet understanding that their limitations were not my burden to carry. The silence from my parents continued, a dull ache that no more consumed me. I created a joyful and purposeful existence. I befriended people, pursued new interests, and found a strength within myself I had never known existed. Though they served as a reminder of the long road I had traveled, the scars of the past no longer defined me. My own healing circle, a community of love and encouragement that honored my path, had been discovered for me, and in that circle, I at last discovered the sense of connection that incorporated the actual meaning of family and the belonging I had longed for, transcending the bounds of blood. Years went by, with the seasons shifting, and my own life's rhythm constant. Like the wind, the whispers of news from my childhood house arrived, carrying bits of a story I had left behind. Ethan apparently had not discovered his tranquility. His problems had spiraled like limbs pointing the wrong way. Word got to me of his growing conduct and his rage exploding on others around him. For those who ventured too near, he had become a thundercloud hovering over their life. The rumors carried of terrified youngsters and anxious parents, of a society on the brink. And then the news that really rocked me to my foundation. Ethan had been detained. The whispers claimed harassment, intimidation, of a line crossed. The youngster who had tortured his younger sister had grown to be a man endangering the welfare of others. Not quite fully, the news was not surprising. Long ago, a family that denied recognizing the reality had raised the roots of his discontent. Still, this proof of a road gone off course depressed me. After years of silence, the phone rang then. Hesitantly and tentatively, my mother's voice broke through years of distance. They wanted to apologize, to reconnect, to chat. Ethan, they acknowledged, required assistance, the kind of assistance they had long denied him. I listened, my heart set a slow, consistent beat. Though the years had blunted the edges of my rage, the wounds persisted. I had created a life full of love and meaning without them. Did I have room for the family that had turned me aside now? Their apologies were sincere and clearly felt. They talked of lost chances and of decisions they would like to reverse. Words, like the wind, cannot, however, wipe the past. The years of neglect and the shattered confidence could not be rebuilt. I still promised to chat and pay attention, though. Maybe among the ruins of the past, a fresh start could be located. Maybe we could find a way to heal, to forgive, to reconnect, like the ground rejuvenating itself during a protracted winter. But the road ahead was unknown, veiled in the shadow of a shared past, difficult to forget. Talking with my parents felt like entering a river following a protracted drought. Familiar, but unnerving, the currents dragging me in unanticipated paths. Their apologies swept over years of hatred and hurt like the waves. They talked of regret, of lost chances, of a want to reconstruct the bridges their past acts torched. Underneath it, though, another river flowed, the pressing need for aid. Ethan's legal problems had sapped his means, leaving him floating in a sea of debt and anxiety. Their eyes went to me, the daughter they had thrown aside. They needed financial help. I listened, the weight of their ask weighing down my heart. How might I help the person who had caused me such suffering? How could I put my limited means into the very hurricane that had almost carried me off? The words caught in my mouth, twisted in a web of contradictory feelings. I talked of the years of neglect and of the invisible wounds carved deep into my soul. I reminded them of their culpability, their relentless loyalty to Ethan, even at the risk of their own daughter. Their features marked with the anguish of recognition, they heard me. Their voices full of regret, they admitted their mistakes. But apologies cannot wipe the past, much as the tides change. The scars still show evidence of a childhood lived in the shadow of their wrong priorities. Still, a sliver of optimism started to blossom inside me. Their eagerness to own their errors and pursue a different route was a seed dropped on the parched ground of our marriage. Maybe with time and careful attention, it could bloom into something more authentic and stronger. I did not extend financial help to them. The trust was too thin, the wounds too raw, but I presented them with something even more valuable, a readiness to listen, to reconnect, and to investigate the prospect of a time when the past did not control us. The road ahead stayed unknown, a meandering path across a scene devastated by years of neglect. But we had started to stroll it together, tentatively, open hearts. The council circle opened, and the conversation started. And in the silence between our remarks, a brittle hope emerged from a whisper of healing carried on the breeze. Story 2. Hi everybody. I need some outside viewpoint on a matter that is truly making me miserable. This Saturday I'm being married, and I'm at my wit's limit. To name is Clara, and until last Monday, I was actually looking forward to wedding to Liam. I am 28. Having spent 5 years together, we have worked very hard to arrange this day. We were immensely appreciative of my parents, kindly offering to pay for much of the wedding. The bomb dropped at that point. Sitting down with me, my mother said informally that Beatrice, 25, my younger sister, and her boyfriend Finn were scheduled to include a proposal into the reception. Finn reportedly planned to mention it in his address. I felt stunned. I turned down right away. It is my wedding day. It should revolve on Liam and me. The way my mother responded was not what I anticipated. Saying I was being unappreciative since my parents paid for the wedding, she became defensive. She even proposed a compromise. Instead of a conventional bouquet toss, I would show Beatrice the bouquet straightforward, as to some sort of manufactured tick hub moment. Then Finn would offer. What I was hearing stunned me. They seemed to be trying to turn my wedding into Beatrice's engagement party. I attempted to express how uncomfortable this made me, how it seemed as if my special day was being stolen. My mother dismissed my worries, said it would happen at the very end of the reception, and wouldn't steal the show. That is not the purpose, though. The essence of the thing is this. I honestly have been crying non-stop since this talk. I'm not good at expressing these kinds of emotions. I feel as though I am insane. Is it me that is irrational here? I sometimes feel like I am, and other times I feel perfectly right in being offended. I hurt, and am rather perplexed. I only want to wed Liam free from this turmoil hovering over us. The first astonishment changed rapidly into a smoldering resentment. The sheer brazenness of my mother, Beatrice, and Finn astounded me. It seemed as though I was completely disregarded emotionally. It was more than simply the proposal. It was about their approach, notifying me just 6 days before the wedding, as though I had no say in the matter. It came out as disrespectful and manipulative. Bless his heart, Liam has been really helpful. He became equally enraged as I did when I told him what happened. How someone might find this acceptable confused him. His reading of some of the internet comments I had received helped to confirm my emotions. People rightfully became enraged on my behalf. Knowing I wasn't by myself in experiencing this gave me some solace. One commentator advised my future husband to gently touch on the matter in his speech, noting how delighted he was that we were celebrating our wonderful day and that any announcements should wait. Another advised keeping security on hand. Should Finn attempt anything, it will enable intervention. Although these concepts appealed to Liam and me, we concluded that bending down to their level would not fix anything. At our wedding, we wanted less drama created. We simply wanted to celebrate our love among our friends and relatives. Then it occurred to me something I had practically forgotten, something buried far below. It was a pattern, a running motif over my life. I remembered how Beatrice was always the favorite child in growing up. Though not mentioned specifically, it was always implied. I never had a birthday celebration reserved just for myself. Though it wasn't her birthday, Beatrice would always get gifts and attention too. One really terrible recollection comes from my 12-year-old years. My parents handed the present my aunt had gotten to Beatrice instead. Furious, my aunt hid all of my gifts and handed them to me after the celebration the next year, so Beatrice wouldn't know. Though it was a perverse attempt to avoid confrontation, it simply made me feel more alone. I found great impact in this awareness. It went beyond the wedding as well. It was about a lifetime of being discounted and underappreciated. This proposed charade was merely the most recent instance of my emotions subordinating to Beatrice's ambitions. They seemed to not even give my feelings any thought. Finn had even added, "I thought you'd be happy for us," when I first rejected the idea. "She loves you very much, you know," as if it justified taking over my wedding. Then my mother added, stating Beatrice had been hinting to Finn about wanting a public proposal. Why did Beatrice's needs constantly eclipse mine? As a satirical countermeasure, Liam proposed a proposal booth adjacent to the picture booth. Though deep down I was suffering, we did giggle at some of the pettier ideas. This was about a lifetime of feeling as though I was living under Beatrice's shadow, not simply about a wedding. It was about, at last, recognizing this was unacceptable. I chose to follow the high path as Liam did. We were not going to let them dash our day. Well, F it, we decided, as Liam phrased it. All that really counted was that we were getting married. Mostly ignoring my family, I spent the rest of the week before the wedding concentrating on Liam and myself. Still, I was occupied with last-minute preparations, and honestly, I needed the space. The wedding day showed up and was lovely, perfect and full of love and delight. The wedding was. That week at the wedding, I paid initial visits to my mother and sister. My mother spoke throughout the reception. Then, as scheduled, she invited Finn to join her. He asked Beatrice to marry him. The room was notably silent. Along with my mother, Beatrice, and Finn, only 2 or 3 others clapped. Like the meme of the girl gazing sideways with a scowl, the other visitors seemed uneasy. As Liam said, their effort to take front stage came flat. The evening was fantastic, the remainder of it. I celebrated our love with my new husband and our closest friends. Finn and my mother, Beatrice, sat sulking for the rest of the evening. Nobody seemed to have gone to congratulate them, though it was embarrassing. Really, I had no interest. It was not of concern to me. After we had left for our honeymoon later that evening, my mother texted me, "Did you sabotage the proposal?" I never bothered to respond either. I was honeymoon bound. I was not going to allow her drama disturb our peace. Besides, I had no need of justifying myself. Their lack of self-awareness really was remarkable. They really did not know how improper their behavior was. Looking back, I see that this whole experience was turning point. It made me face a years-long trend of conduct that had been going on. It was about at last realizing my own value and establishing limitations, not only about a wedding proposal. I discovered that someone is not entitled to treat me disrespectfully just because they are kin. I am deserving of celebration, of sight, of hearing. My rock through all of this has been Liam. He has been really helpful as he knows how profoundly this has affected me. To help us negotiate these familial dynamics and guarantee our effective communication on delicate topics, we have chosen to begin couples therapy. To deal with the more profound emotional scars from my childhood, I also want individual treatment. It's time, in my opinion, to really sort the past and heal. Our wedding day was lovely despite the early stress. I will choose to keep in mind that it was an honoring of our love. Everything is still on schedule. We issued the save the dates. This encounter helped me to see the strength of our partnership and the need of giving our personal happiness top priority. Though I'm not sure what the future holds for my family, I know I will not be able to stand to be treated like an afterthought. I aim to use my voice because I have found it.